I guess this is the beginning, I think.
Heads up.
Um, so as far, I mean, I guess what I need to do first is I need to say thank you guys for talking with me, and I want to know who I'm speaking with whenever what voice happens. So I guess Anthony, if you want to be the first to say hello and introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's me. I'm Anthony, and I was the programmer for Vengeful Rites,
Yeah, and you were
among other
also
things.
I was about to
Primary
say
voice actor, and
along many other
there's
things.
yeah. Well, most of it was like a collaborative effort,
Right,
but
right.
both of us pretty much did a bit of everything. But I was the sole coder, and Reaver was the sole 3D modeler.
Okay, okay. Heck yeah.
And I'm Reaver, like Anthony said. My name's Michael, and yeah, I did the 3D modeling and a lot of the level design, like putting the levels together and making the pieces to make the levels out of some of the animation stuff. And like Anthony said, we kind of both touched a lot of the same things, but there was certain things that just one of us did. So
Yeah, when there's
Right.
only two people, you got to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression I got. That's so I mean me like Michael, I know I'm super glad that you got to actually talk with us. I'm super hyped to talk to you guys. But I know Anthony, me and him talked for a little while. So I have a fear that you and I are going to repeat a lot of the things that we already talked about, but I think that's just kind of going to happen. So I'm. You should both know, by the way, I am not a professional interviewer by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I
Uh,
would say we're barely professional game developers, so
yeah, no.
you're in good company.
all right, so I did one of the most unprofessional things that you could probably do, and I pretty much Anthony, I read back through our conversations and I just copied and pasted a bunch of the questions that I thought to ask you, and I guess I'll
Impeccable.
just repeat it now.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess if it comes off as it's scripted, it's because it is. I'm reading copy and
I
pasted
mean, that's
stuff.
how most interviews go anyway, right? You don't want them to just meander aimlessly.
That's true. Wait, have you guys done any interviews prior to this?
Um,
One, I think, right?
two
One, two.
technically.
Two. Wow. I guess I can't say
Yeah,
I'm the first.
with the same publication, I guess you could call it, but they weren't really in
Or
tune with the VR community. Like nobody on the podcast even had a VR headset, so they were asking very general things, like less specific to the game and more about VR as a whole.
oh, okay. Well, oh, was that whenever Vengeful Rites was coming out? Like that's when it was releasing. They decided to interview you two.
Yeah, it was twice. It was when we went into early access around then.
Oh
We
wow.
apparently did an interview with them, which we totally forgot about for like a couple of years. And then they asked us to do another one. And we were like, oh yeah, sure, that sounds cool. And then halfway through, we remembered that we had already had an interview with them and they still hadn't gotten VR headsets. It had been like 2 years, 2.5 years since the previous one. No one had tried VR yet. They were still very much of the mind that it was kind of gimmicky and everyone who put one on just started throwing up immediately.
I hate that. Like it breaks my heart whenever people are like, "Oh, VR is so gimmicky at the moment." I'm just like, have you played a VR game though? They're really not.
Yeah, I mean, even super simple ones. Like, how many people love even like creative ones like Tilt Brush or Vermilion's out now? That looks really
Yeah.
awesome. Like, you could do a lot with VR, and it's super immersive and just gives you an experience you can't get without it.
I agree completely. All right, so I guess we should actually do the first question. So I guess you could tell me how you two came up with the idea to do Vengeful Rites. Like, what was the thought process behind uh, oh, we're gonna make this humongous VR adventure inspired by The Legend of Zelda, Dark Souls, blah blah blah.
I mean, I would say two primary factors. The first being theft of the Zelda IP and and others, and the second being just hubris. We hadn't really made a big game before, so we didn't realize just how much of an undertaking it was going to be. We thought we are like, oh, maybe like 18 months, 2 years, this thing will be done. And I think it could have got done that quickly if we knew what we were doing from the start. But it
Yeah.
ended up
Yeah,
taking like nearly double that.
we did a lot of we did do a lot of testing and a lot of trying different things out. We tried probably like two or three different versions of trees and how to place them, and
They're really basic stuff that we were
yeah.
just trying to figure out. Also, we were dead set on, because it was our first game and we didn't really expect it to be commercially very successful, we wanted to use it as much as we could as a learning opportunity. So we
Yeah.
made everything in the game. There's like a handful of assets that we downloaded that were small things, and everything else
Well,
we made.
Wow, that's so cool. Oh
that was
man,
the
that's
goal,
so
yeah.
cool. So
Yeah,
like,
let's just let's try to learn how to do all of it so that we know how to do all of it. Because I mean, making games is dope. But I guess more specifically, since that's kind of dodging like the actual inspiration of the game, is we grew up with games like, Legend of Zelda, like Ocarina of Time, and the Soul Reaver series, and then Dark Souls and The Witcher later on. And those games were awesome, and they provide a really cool sense of adventure that you don't really get in other games. We hadn't seen anything like that in VR. The closest thing at the time was probably Vanishing Realms, but it was like 2 hours long, and there wasn't really a narrative to it. And the mechanics were a little bare bones, right? Like it was pretty much a prototype for what VR could be. So it's like you had melee combat, but there wasn't really much like responsiveness to it, or you could just hold up a shield and block everything or poke
right.
around a shield thing. And we were like, well, we could try to make this, the way we thought it would be, based off
Yeah.
our concept of virtual reality from back in the day, like seeing the old PS2 commercial for the PlayStation 9 where there's a guy like running on buildings and jumping around in VR. And we were like, oh, I can't wait till it's really like that. And now it kind of is. And it's pretty dope.
Yeah, like with Stride and stuff, like
Yeah.
games like that is very like those kind of mirror's edge kind of games. Like there's a lot of cool games out there for VR now that are pretty cool,
Mm-hmm.
and it just needs to be a little bit more quick and easy to get into it, I think. And then like the Quest has made it quite a bit more accessible, so
Yeah.
it's on its way, really.
Yeah,
Just
we just
couple-
wanted to make. Oh, okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say a couple more headsets come out with a good price point and stuff like that, and I think it'll pick up, and maybe a little bit more. It's already very immersive, but maybe even a little bit more immersive could be pretty insane,
For sure.
Yeah, they're making strides all the time with that. But,
Yeah, with
but
like
we
the
wanted
face
to make
and stuff.
we
Face
wanted to
tracking.
make a game that was actually had some length to it. Like you said, it's a huge RPG because, like I was saying, everything before that, before we started
Yeah.
working on the game, and even now, there's only like maybe 2 or 3 games that actually have a pretty long campaign to them, a
Yeah.
handful maybe. And we were like, you know what, I want something like this where I could get lost in this for, I mean, you could potentially knock it out in one day if you're going to play it for like 16 hours straight and you don't get caught up on any of the puzzles. But most people will
Yeah.
probably do 2 or 3 hour sessions, and it'll take them maybe a week to beat it.
Yep.
We're like,
Yep.
that's a pretty reasonable length of time. That's an actual game, coming from non-VR.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you would say that's a full-on game and not just a taste of what a game could be.
Well, dude, that's like the whole reason I so like the way that this all went down was I finished that final boss fight and I was like, damn, that was crazy. And then I was like, I have to see who made this game. And then I saw like, what was it, 6 people's names in the credits, and I was like, holy crap! Like, how in the
Yeah.
world did this small team pull this off? Like, I have to talk to these guys if that's even possible. So I kind of went kind of sicko creeper mode, and I Googled Anthony's name, and I found your LinkedIn, and then I found the Discord,
I have
and
a
then
LinkedIn.
maybe it wasn't even you. Maybe it's just somebody
I
else
think
that
I
has
made
your.
one. I think I made one that I've never logged into. For the
Yeah,
second
yeah.
time.
Well, it led us here.
Fair.
But yeah, then I found that, and then I found, I think completely unrelated, I found y'all's Discord server, and I was like, I'm just going to message the one at the top of the list.
Sure.
And here we are. So
Yeah.
I guess the next question would be, actually, no, I have another, I thought of one, because I'm so good at this. Did you guys work on VR games before this, or were you strictly
Nope.
like, no, okay,
We didn't
so,
work on any games. I mean, I made with a buddy of mine a VR escape room
oh,
that
cool.
took us like 2 months to make, and it's because we didn't know literally anything about game development. We were
I was
just like,
about to
let's
say-
download Unity and see what we could do. And I bought a couple of textbooks like Teach Yourself C Sharp, and my buddy started messing around with Blender. And then we threw together an escape room because we figured, as far as games go, that's about as simple as you can get, right? There's like a handful of mechanics. It's like you just have to be able to move around, basically press some buttons and input codes, or interact with a few objects. And we made that. And the original plan was, let's make this a series, right? Like the title of the game is Inescapable VR, and then subtitled Underground, because the intention was we'll make a few Inescapable VRs, and we'll have maybe 3 or 4 of them, and then once we've really got our bearings and we feel like we've got a strong grasp on this development thing, then we would make Vengeful Rites. Although we had no idea for a name or anything at the time. We're just like, then we'll make the RPG thing that we would do. And then right after the first Inescapable came out, I started just prototyping, messing around with like some combat. And I was like, oh no,
You got too
this
excited.
is happening now. I was like, yeah, this is Inescapable is dead, at least for the moment. I'm diving whole hog into this.
Oh, man, I'm so envious of individuals such as yourself who can do that. Because like I told you, I downloaded Unity, and I was watching a couple 3-hour long tutorials, and I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like everybody has ideas. Like, oh, I could make a game. I have ideas, but then you start doing it, and I'm horrible at math, so the coding it kind of scared me away. And then I think I'm better at video type stuff. Like I think I'm better at editing, but. Man,
your videos are great. So I mean, you're definitely in your niche.
Oh, you stop it! But it really is like I have such respect for you guys and how dedicated you can be to this kind of stuff. So I guess the next thing that would kind of branch off of that is, how did you come to the conclusion of what kind of abilities you wanted the player to have in the game? Obviously, combat is an inert one, but was it just more or less like, oh, we're just gonna play test and see what would be fun? Or was it you had a list of things that you were like, these need to be in there for mechanics to work the way they need to?
It was a combination. I would say there were certain things that we knew from the beginning these are going to be in. Like when we started, we knew there was going to be the ability to switch between melee combat, archery, and magic, on the fly pretty seamlessly. Like we wanted that to be a part of it. And for the magic, we had, I think, three of the 4
disciplines.
Schools.
Okay.
Yeah, planned out. Yeah, disciplines. Where we knew there was going to be destruction magic. We knew there would be healing magic, and we knew there would be protection magic. And the kinesis wasn't immediately like, oh, that's going to definitely be in there. But like going back to the theft thing, went back
we played something where it had
The
like
Witcher. The Witcher has spells in it called signs, and it has almost all of the ones that we have, except they don't have a healing one, but they have a telekinesis one. Although it doesn't work like the telekinesis in our game, where you can move objects around freely. It's more like the kinetic thrust, where you can just blast things. And
okay. Well, I got kinesis was definitely my favorite, but continue.
Yeah, mine too. Probably maybe destruction. The fire wave is really sad.
Yeah.
I just want to correct you, by the way. It's not theft, okay? It's called
inspiration.
It's called
That's
legitimate
true.
counterfeit, is what it's called.
Legitimate counterfeit.
It's called legitimate counterfeit.
That's correct.
Heck
Plausible
yeah.
deniability. Hold on, wait. The Witcher. What? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, what's the Witcher?
What is that? Who?
They made
what now? The Witch? What now?
The Onceler from Dr. Seuss.
Oh, that was the guy. Yeah. Because he was like a wizard sort. Yeah.
He did the trees.
Yeah, but then a lot of the other stuff was sort of trial and error, or some of it even just based off community feedback. Like we had different plans for
That's right.
The final spell of the destruction discipline, which was going to be, we had a couple of them. It was going to be just either like a meteor storm kind of thing, pretty classic, or like traps that you could set down. The very original design had traps as part of every discipline. Like originally it wasn't going to be you unlock all these new abilities. You were just going to have everything from the start, which would have been way overwhelming. Like even the originally everybody had access to the ability to enchant their arrows, which I don't know if you even know that's like in the game. It's one of the perks.
Yeah, that's the That's for the advanced arrow tier, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's the final thing you unlock. And originally, just everybody could do it.
Oh,
And we were
wow.
like, this is too much. Like, people are just going to be totally overwhelmed by all of this. We're going to have to find a way to stagger this out. And then we decided to go with the perk system.
Good
But,
choice.
Yeah.
but then,
And
yeah,
then
the
the
community
perk
came
system
in.
thing was probably one of my favorite things that we worked on. One of my favorite things, I would say, too,
Yeah, I like it.
because it's just the
The
physical,
presentation is
yeah, the
cool,
physical representation of a perk tree is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
It was
physical tree.
it was very unique. I'll give you guys that. It unlocking the advanced spells was so cool.
Thanks, yeah. We were pretty excited about that. And then we're like, oh, we'll just have actual stairs. Because it's like, well, how do we get it so... Because you have to think about every little thing when you're making a game, right? So you're like, okay, well, if we can let them unlock them in different orders, then how are we going to sort of, in a unified way, allow them to reach a final perk point? Like, how do you present that? And then we're like, oh, well, we'll just have them on floating islands, and we'll have stairs physically come in each time you put one in the right section, basically, and it'll
Yeah.
actually open a physical path to reach it. And we thought that was a pretty cool way to do it.
That stuff goes such a long way, especially in VR.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we were pretty hell bent on making it feel immersive, because it's VR. It has to be immersive. If it's not, then it just instantly disconnects you, and you feel like you're playing a game. And that wasn't what we were going for. We were going for we wanted you to feel like you were this adventurer,
Yeah.
going around this world, avenging your slain master.
Yeah, where you had to do everything in obviously it's a little gamified and there's some arcadey aspects to
Yeah.
it, but
Oh,
everything
sure.
has a physical interaction. Like, it's funny, we were laughing. We actually got a negative review, and in the review, one of his big criticisms for like a paragraph, he says how difficult it was to fire the bow, not like to aim it. He was just like, oh, well, first you have to grab the arrow, then you have to put it on the string, then you have to pull it back, then you have to aim, and then you're dead. And I was like, you just described archery. Like, you didn't, that's not a list of cons. Those are the steps to fire an arrow
Oh my
in
god.
archery. Isn't that what you would like? Because I personally hate in VR archery where an arrow just spawns on the string. It's not terrible, but it's like
Yeah. It's
more
a
often than
little.
not, I feel like I could do it faster if I could just grab the arrow and do it myself instead of waiting for an arrow to respawn
Yep.
on the string. Maybe it's because I played so much Quiver back in the day. It got me to be like a sharpshooter, like speed shooter.
Or that Steam
Or the lab.
archery game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
lab.
lab.
Well, I mean, I'm not siding with that dude at all, because that's just a silly thing to say. But I'd have to say that archery was probably my least favorite way to attack enemies.
You're not alone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, plenty of people feel that. I mean, it's both the most difficult and the strongest. That's how
Really?
we balance it out. Yeah, because if you get headshots, and especially if you set your arrows on fire, for example, then you
Oh,
could
yeah.
kill most enemies in like one or two headshots, especially if you do it from stealth, because you could hit them long before they
Right.
even know you're there.
That's fair. I had no idea. Maybe that'll inspire a second playthrough, because I have thought about what a second playthrough would be like. I'm just horrible with that bow. Like, something about whenever the arrow touches the drawstring, it like changes a little bit, and it always throws me off. And I think I get too frustrated because my arms get tired.
Fair. Yeah, I
It
find
happens,
that
yeah.
it's you get it dialed in once, like where your bow hand is,
Yep.
and then you just start quickly knocking the arrows to it and pulling them back to the same spot over and over. Like, I don't
Gotta
even look
have
at
that.
the bow anymore, and I
Gotta
turn it
have
a
that
little bit.
physical memory.
Yeah, it comes down to the muscle memory largely.
But I guess to go along with that, I couldn't help but notice as the game goes along, it gets exponentially better. Like bosses, puzzles, they all have like this wow factor. And was that I probably it was just you guys learning as you go along, but I was also curious how that played a part in the blocked out development that you guys did for Vengeful Rites, because you said that it went into early access, and I know that you did builds as you went along. Like, I think Anthony, you said it was episodes?
Chapters, we call them.
Chapters. There you go. Okay, so tell me a little bit about that, because as me who played the game in the year 2022, I only saw it as one complete product. I'm curious as to how it went through its many revisions and pass-throughs.
There was a lot of them because not only were there the individual chapter releases, but there was just countless mini updates throughout the course. We had a sort of rhythm where the game initially released in early access with just the first chapter, which ended with the giant golem at the end of the cave. You kill him, and then you couldn't leave the cave at that. There was just a notification, and it would say chapter 2 is in development, and we'll let you know when it releases. And it mostly had the mechanics pretty sorted. Everything got refined over time, but the combat was largely the same. There was a lot of like optimization and improvements to things like hit detection that went in over time. But we basically did something like every 8 months on average, we would release another chapter, which the second chapter then was, the Seraphim Castle that ends in the throne room fighting the Lich King, Seraph.
Oh, yeah, cool. You get through the swamp. That's still my favorite area.
I like the swamp area.
The swamp?
I just like the environment. I just like the atmosphere of it.
It was such a, coming out, because I know personally I'm already not a humongous fan of caves in games, but I thought that the cave was just a little bit too long, and whenever I hit the swamp, I was like, oh man, this is cool.
Yeah, even though it's so overcast and probably poisonous, it's still a breath of fresh air.
It is.
Been underground for so long.
It was so cool. And I'm a sucker for beaches. I loved, because you hit the beach right whenever you're coming from the first village, and then you get the beach. Actually, there's a couple of there's 3 beaches, I think.
Yeah, there's technically 3 beaches, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, one's like a dock scene, but it's a 100-foot long beach, roughly.
I loved it. To totally tangent off, I know people I'm sure if even you guys, if you could go back, you would do better. You would do more with it graphically, but I don't get all the hate towards the visuals. I think it lends to a storybook element to the way it looks. I totally dig it.
Yeah, well, we knew we weren't going to make anything absolutely stunning because we were total noobs, but we figured we would go with an art style that was a little more timeless. Because if you try to go for something photorealistic, it never holds up, right? In 5 or 10 years, it's going to look like trash compared to whatever's out now, at the time. But cartoony elements, like people still play World of Warcraft Classic, even, that looked, basically it had better lighting than our game does, but the art style wasn't anything super detailed or immersive. We were trying to go for basically bring back that Ocarina of Time vibe in VR. And we knew that would be pretty performant also, which is a big deal, especially because, again, as noobs, we were not experts in optimization. So we were like, let's not make this as hard as possible on ourselves.
Yeah, and like Anthony said, realistically, one of the major things that help is that doesn't make our game look too great is the lighting. If the lighting was a little bit better, if we knew how to do lighting better when we were making that game, maybe it would have looked a little better. But for the most part, we went with pretty basic lighting setup. So
I was gonna ask because I'm curious. Was it all baked in, or because I know the one level, the forest level after you get done with Godly Island, whenever you get done with the God Island, it's like there's the sun has a light source and it peeks through the trees. Am I wrong, or is that a trick that you guys using?
No, there's actually no baked lighting in the whole game because, again, we were noobs. So it's all real time. It wasn't a creative decision necessarily. It was we don't really know how to do this. And also the models aren't configured in a way that we could easily bake the lighting into them. Because, again, we had no idea what we were doing. And we just wanted to... I mean, also, most of the light sources are dynamic, right? You can take the torches off the walls. You can hold spells in your hands and they cast light.
That's right.
We were like, you know what? Let's not bake that, because otherwise that's going to be an issue with that, right? It'll be weird if you take a torch off and it's still super brightly lit where that fire used to be.
Okay, well,
but we would have made those changes because you don't have to bake in those. Again, we had no idea. Now I know.
Right.
But at the time, we didn't. But we would definitely. That would be the primary thing we would change, I would think.
We kind of petered off there, but back on the bosses and the puzzles and it being very early in development, would you guys? I know Anthony's already said that he would if he could, obviously, but what are some of the first things that stick out to you? Like, man, if I could go back, I would definitely not do that way.
Probably the first boss's puzzle to enter the first boss.
Oh,
Uh,
the
Oh,
crystal.
the third boss. You mean the golem?
yeah, the first main boss. I
The
mean,
first, yeah, the first dungeon boss. Right?
Yep.
the first, yeah, the
Keystone
golem. Yeah,
Guardian.
blasting the projectile into it. I think we could have probably come up with a better mini puzzle to get into the golem's room, like maybe blasting down like a pillar or something like that with your.
Some sort of demonstration, I think, would have
Yeah.
like if we could have like tricked the player into blasting an unstable crystal into something like that, and then they see it explode. But then there's always the concern that, well, maybe they don't notice that that happened, and it doesn't help anyway, right? You'd have to make it very explicit, or you'd have to have something else do it, like create a machine or something
Yeah.
that's creating a similar visual effect to your kinetic thrust.
And that being said, it's not for lack of trying. We did think of
Oh, sure.
a few different tries there, a few different methods of trying to help the player figure out how to use that spell. But it was one of those things where we got a lot of feedback about people having trouble with that specific thing, not knowing how to get it done.
Yep.
And so if there's one thing going back for that chapter, I would say it would be that. And then I don't know.
No,
That's the one that stands out the most to me.
That's the big one. I also mentioned the dragon portion of
Yeah.
the Seraph fight. It's a little underwhelming. Would have liked to do more with that.
Yeah, we wanted to do a lot more with that actually, but then it was the rest of that level was so much bigger than we originally anticipated. That it got to a point where we were like, if we continue to go with this route,
We need to rein it in a bit.
yeah, it's like, and we did that on a few things too. Like we started big and then we trimmed the fat, and we're like, all right, we can't do that, we can't do this. It's gonna take us 2 years to just make this one part. Like,
Yeah, the whole ghost beard section where you have to go
Yeah.
around the ship and find the various
Oh, yeah.
elements. That was originally going to be an actual voyage across the sea. We were like, okay,
Oh,
well,
wow.
we'll basically do like a Sea of Thieves style thing where you'll be sailing the ship with him, and while you're sailing it, like there were no items to find. It wasn't going to be,
Huh.
find a telescope, find a map, find a compass. It was going to be, well, he's going to sail you across, and then while you're going across, you're going to be ambushed by, like goblin-led ships, and you would have to fight them off, and then occasionally they would do damage to your hull, and you'd have to repair it. And we were thinking about it, we're like, we could get that made in probably 2 or 3 months, and it would be a really cool first section to go into this next chapter.
Yeah.
And then we were like, well, hypothetically we could, but also whatever estimate you have initially, you pretty much always have to double. You're going to run
Yep.
into some sort of issue. Something's going to happen. And then we were like, also, that's an entire game in itself. Like
Yeah.
that would be, it's a bit ambitious because we call it the foyer section of each chapter. You have your foyer, and then you have your actual dungeon that you get into, right? It's like your transitionary section. So those were typically a little more slow-paced and methodical, and just sort of letting you adjust to the new environment that you're in and learn some new abilities and sort of prepare yourself for the dungeon, which is going to be the main challenge. So like that's one that's not going to teach you anything that would be useful beyond that point, right? It would just be a cool experience, which there's nothing wrong with that. Those things are super memorable when you encounter that kind of thing in a game.
Yeah.
But it was just going to be so much that we were like, you know what, let's rein it in a bit. We just started having people collect these quest items and use those for puzzles, so why don't we do something with that? We figured we'll just make them gather the the navigation tools required in order to get this guy to take you across the ocean.
Going back to the golem, I actually did have to look up a walkthrough on how to do that, because you have to move the crystal so he throws his hands down on them, and
Yeah.
in my gamer brain I was like, oh well, I need to I need to make it to him with all of these crystals and then kinetic thrust them into his chest.
Sure.
But that wasn't quite the right answer. But
he went through a lot of iteration, actually.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't even like that initially. For that wall
Really?
didn't exist to begin with. The original mechanic was kind of what you're describing, except you didn't have to bring them all to him. It would be you just activate the crystal and then blast it, and then it would go into his heart. And you do that 3 times and he died.
That
And
was
a lot of
that
people
was the initial
couldn't
one.
figure that out. Like, we had it set up. You could see, for example, with all of the unstable crystals you activate, that there's
right.
sort of 2 stalagmite from the floor, one of those coming up on either side, so it looks kind of like a crosshair. And the idea being that that would hopefully go in people's brains of, okay, if I line this up so it's between those 2 things, I can blast it into them and sort of use it to aim. And a lot of people weren't figuring that out either. So we decided to put the wall before that, so that if you were going to get a little frustrated and if you were going to have to take your time to figure out how the mechanic worked, it wouldn't be in a combat situation where you would get killed 30 times and not know what the hell's going on and start, start raging. And then we tried to figure out the best way to make the wall thing as obvious as possible. So, we put in the hint saying, oh, the ability you're using isn't strong enough, and seeing it get pushed back. And we have a hint system. So we said, you know what? Since we can't seem to come up with anything, we're just going to rely on the hint system. And after like 15 seconds, I think it prompts you to say like, hey, the wall is trying to push this crystal back for some reason. So you would hopefully think, well, maybe I can stop it from doing that somehow. And then that combined with the line, that spell isn't strong enough, would hopefully trigger people to go, okay, well, if I use a stronger spell to do it, maybe that'll overpower it.
Right.
But a lot of people still seem to struggle with it. It's a difficult situation as the developer, because you know what has to happen. And you go, well, I'm trying to give pieces to tell people without outright telling them.
Yeah.
And it's like a fine line you have.
Yeah, because that was one of the big things for us, was we never wanted to let players. We never wanted to just hold the player's hand. We always wanted them to feel like that accomplishment of I figured it out.
Yeah.
We always wanted it to be one of those things where it's gonna be difficult, but when you figure it out, more often than not, you're probably gonna go, I can't believe I didn't figure that out sooner. I'm so stupid.
Yeah, or something along that. We aim for facepalm moments, right? That was the cutoff for us. Where if you don't solve it, and then once you get all the hints, you figure it out, then you go, oh, of course. Like, how could I not have realized that? But I mean, we probably missed the mark with a couple of them. But that was the goal.
Like in the second chapter, when you're opening up the door to leave out of the bottom of that tower with the painting, or you're trying to get the the crank. That was it. You're trying to get the crank. I haven't played our game in a while, and it's been a while.
You're trying to get the lever to activate the elevator.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
The 4 pressure plates that you have to put the items onto with the paintings behind it.
Yeah, that one gets so many people, and once they figure it out, they're like, "Oh, of course!"
Yep.
What's in his left hand? Of course.
Now I see. Now I get
that
it.
one was cool. That one was really cool. The one, I think it's right after you beat. Oh no, it's right after you beat. I think the spider boss. It's like the 3 pistons that you have to move the minecart or something like that. And
yeah, you rotate the gears to create the climbing path, and then also raise the crushers so you have access to the bombs. That's one of my favorites. Also.
I'm ashamed to say I had to look that one up, but once I saw it, I'm like, I could have figured that out. Come on.
That's the goal. That's all we hope for.
That's the goal.
If you can't get it,
Successful
then you
on
can
that
take
one.
the blame for it and go, okay, that's on me. I figured.
Yep.
Yeah, we never wanted. Sorry, I'll leave it at this one. We never wanted anybody to feel like it was so ridiculous that you wouldn't be able to figure it out.
No, but I think that you hit the nail on the head with those. Like, more often, I think my whole thing with that was I really do think that you guys just got better as you went on. Like, it's super easy to see that with the boss fights, especially like the spider boss feels a little less than what the mechanics were built for, but like the one-on-one sword fights with the vampire and with the Lich King, those and the final fight with Dragor, and oh my gosh, the best fight in the game for me was the big fire golem using the anchor points to swing around and then shoot the lightning into his crystal. Oh my god, I like
that a lot too, but you are in the minority there.
Really?
so many people hate that fight.
Oh my God,
They,
people are
they
dumb.
hate it.
You're
Yeah.
actually in the minority for quite a few of those. Actually, a lot of people
What?
don't actually like the like they don't dislike them, but they don't like them as much. From the feedback I've
Well, that was the Dragor fight initially.
well, no, not even
But
the Dragor fight. I'm taking more of the vampire fight and the Lich King fight. Like
really, I don't remember much feedback about
people
Yoga number one.
I remember reading a couple of different things about people saying like those ones were just less interesting than the
Yeah,
other.
they're more
Wow.
straightforward because most of the other ones have puzzle elements. Well, because that's one of the primary things we wanted to do, right? Was to differentiate the bosses from
I was
the
about to
trash
say,
mobs that you
it's
fight throughout the
variety.
course. Exactly, right? So we wanted to. Well, each of the bosses in the first chapter. I mean, the Spider Queen, maybe less so than the others. She's kind of like an MMO kind of boss, right? Where there's just like phases. You have to
Right.
kill the trash mobs and then you get her. But like the troll, where you have to bait him into the pillars and then make them explode, and the
People had
golem.
trouble with that one too.
Not most people. A few people have. I think a few people have like legitimately just taken a half hour and just attacked him with their sword, doing 1 damage each
Oh
time.
God.
And it's like, I mean, okay, like it's designed to let you do that, I guess.
Sure.
But hopefully, any reasonable person would see that they're basically scratching him and go, "There's got to be something else to this," and then
Yep.
look for a way to get it done. But yeah, we always wanted the boss fights to not be just a bigger crash mob because that's what a lot of games in VR, especially, were doing at the time. And it
Right.
didn't feel like there was anything that really set them apart. Like, oh, that was an experience. That's something I'll remember. So that was a big part of it. But at the same time, we figured our combat's pretty good. A lot of people really like it. We really like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to have occasionally, you want to have a boss in there that just says, hey, prove that you've mastered the combat, that you
Yeah.
can handle just a one-on-one fight. And that's where Seraph and Janus, the vampire, come in, because they're pretty much those barriers of you're going to have to show you know what you're doing and that you can survive in a tough situation if you want to progress beyond this point. It's not just figuring out a trick. You actually there's a skill barrier.
Yeah. Like I think that those are. I think that those two were like. I was desperate for some duel encounters, and I think those proved to be extremely like on what I wanted. But I really do think the game excels with the spectacle boss fights, like the tree and the two otherworld. All of the otherworld boss fights were fantastic. That's what I'm saying. Like I think you guys just got amazing at what you knew the game could do towards the end.
We definitely knew for the last chapter that we wanted to like step it up in like the spectacle of the boss of
Grand finale.
Yeah, like every boss in the last one, we wanted it to be like spectacular. Like I think, and forgive me, like it's been a while, like I said, but like we kind of cut back Dragor's fight a little bit. Like there was parts in there
Just a
that
tad. There was a section we were going to have where you sort of chase him across a bunch of platforms beforehand, but it wasn't like I don't remember what the very first part of it was. I don't think it had the section where there was like his trash mob guardians that you had to overcome before you could fight him directly. It was we had something else there. I don't remember what it was, but then it was going to be this sort of launching yourself from platform to platform, chasing after him while he's retreating, and then a battle, and then maybe that was it. Maybe that was just the first part, and then you fought him in his human form,
the first part.
and then the third part was you fighting him in his giant form.
Oh, cool.
But, we ended up doing away with the chase portion of it and decided instead to go with, what, he's going to be pelting you with fireballs while he has, because we're telling you this whole time that he's, raising an army or like amassing strength. So it's like, we should show that at some point, right? Just so it's a little believable. Because the narrative of the game, it's not entirely an afterthought, but it definitely wasn't the primary focus of the game. Originally, there was almost no narrative. It was just like, oh, Dragor showed up, he killed your boy, and now you need to go get him. And when the game first ended early access, like there were no NPCs that spoke. There was pretty much no story buildup. I think we had a handful of books that were placed around that you could read if you wanted to get a little bit of lore, and the carvings on the spell altars that give you a little bit of backstory, but nothing beyond that. So we were impressed upon by the community to give more of a reason for why you were doing these things, because people were largely in agreement, that the mechanics and everything are fun, but I'd like to have some sort of main goal or a driving force, something to keep me
Right.
wanting to push forward. So that was where we started adding in all the, the NPCs to give you some backstory and sort of build out the lore of the world a little bit. And then Abaddon just showing up as a ghost. That was one of the last things that made it into the game.
Yeah.
Previously, he just died, and then you went on a mission, and occasionally a merchant would tell you some stuff, and then you'd meet Ghost
And it
Spirit
was
at one point.
And the merchant would tell you like some stuff that was like pretty vague and like cryptic too. Like it wasn't ever really like too specific. Some
Yeah,
of it was specific.
Hints.
And
you don't want to
older like
pull away those surprises either. Where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you're gonna run into a giant golem. It's just like, hey man, something going on here. I don't know.
yeah.
I've heard some bad stuff.
and then like give you like a little bit of backstory about like some past events, that, things like that. But not really like helping you guide you too much.
Right.
And certainly not pulling everything back to Dragor. He
Yeah,
doesn't do a particularly good job of that. But that was where Abaddon comes in and going, hey, reminder, this is your chapterly reminder that you're out to get this dude. He's getting stronger. You got to get these keystones and get over it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I remember towards the end we started talking about more, like trying to figure out how to draw in, like, because I remember we spoke about like the Zelda games and the other, like The Witcher and Soul Reaver and all these other games that we've taken inspiration from, and how like there is kind of always like a guiding line that is toted for you. So like
Ganondorf shows up from time to time and
Right,
goes, hey,
yeah.
remember me, the guy that you're going after? And you go, oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, or like in Soul Reaver, you have like the time wheel guy, or I can't remember the
Mobius.
Yeah, Mobius, the giant octopus that you go back to every now and then, and it's like you visit. We didn't have like a central location for people to go back to, so that posed an issue. But the ghost of Abaddon, just straight ripping off Star Wars Jedi ghosts. We were like, that'll work.
We went with ideas that would lend themselves to people just showing up wherever you were conveniently, right? And we even made a joke with the merchant, right, where he continually comments on how he keeps beating you to these places.
Yeah.
We sort of hit him with the Officer Jenny shred.
It's pretty good.
And Nurse Joy from Pokemon. We're like, oh, it's just the same dude every time. Originally, we thought maybe we would have him be a different guy. It'd be like a bunch of twin brothers.
Yeah. Oh,
like I've never met you before, but then eventually we decided to just go with, he's just going to take some subtle jabs at the player and just say, no, it's your fault for getting here so slowly.
Yeah, I want to get back to the merchant in just a second, but I do want to, because I'm sure that this was, like you said, the narrative was a bit on the back burner, but I remember at the very beginning of the game, whenever Dragor kills Abaddon, he says the humans have had it too good for too long or something like that, and they all need to die. And then at the very end of the game, whenever he's given his like little final speech, he's like, I bet you think you're the hero of this story, and you just go into all these places and you kill all these things because you think you're supposed to. And that was something I even wrote it in my script. I was like, I would have loved for that to have been a choice, but it's a video game, so all the enemies aggro you as soon as they see you and stuff like that.
We thought about that, yeah, and we thought about giving you some sort of choice at the end, where when he's presenting you with that, where you could go, you know what, maybe I'm going to side with him, but it didn't. Like you said, we hadn't really given you a choice earlier. Like that kind of thing would make more sense if you had choices throughout the game that could sort of build up to it. But it'd be pretty weird if you're like, hey, I just genocided several hundred goblins and skeletons and elementals, and you know what, I'm having a change of heart now at the end. So we just said, you know what, just commit at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was always an underlying aspect of it, that you're not actually. It's not that you're the bad guy, and I mean you're on a
it's not that you're the
path.
It's not,
also,
it's really nothing about you, actually. It's more about.
It's just the Seraphim are not.
It's more
quite,
about Dragor and the Seraphim. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're not quite the heroes that the history books you find will tell you. Like, I don't know if you actually read them, but when the altars open up to give you the new spells and there's writing in those, it's always from the perspective of Malgrim, who was like the leader of the others when they came to the human world.
Oh.
And it's pretty much his story of how he saved them from the other world after this cataclysmic event. He opened a gate that brought them to your world, and how they're making their way and learning, and how he befriended King Seraph at some point, and then got betrayed by him and got turned on.
Very Dark Souls-y.
Yeah, I mean, again, we originally there was almost no direct story told to you. We were sort of going with the Dark Souls approach of, you know what, we're going to put books around, we're going to put these little hints and tips.
Yeah.
So if people are interested in it, you know, we're not going to beat them over the head with it, but it'll be there. And then
No.
we'd say, you know, we'll beat them over the head a little bit.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
I think you got a nice mix going on there. It worked out pretty well. I wasn't super duper into the backstory and the lore and everything, but I am very appreciative that it is there for players that like that kind of stuff and actually do get super invested. Because I'm not even, whenever I go through all the Dark Souls games, I usually am not the one to read item descriptions and stuff like that, but I am grateful that it is there because, you know, you have YouTube channels like Vati Vidya that just completely dives into that stuff. I think it's super
made a
cool.
career out of uncovering everything that's
has he
that
not?
goes on.
Gee willikers.
Yeah.
Like he even got what was it with Elden Ring? They contracted him to make the tutorial video for the game, which is insane.
Oh, did they? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Awesome.
I mean, if you got a job, you should do it well.
Oh, back to the chapter 4 bosses, the otherworld bosses too.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yes.
part of the reason why they're all such spectacles, not just for the sake of grand finale, is you're pretty overpowered at that point, you know, compared to most of the trash mobs. Or at least that's the idea. Once you've got your ultimates and you're starting to get some other perks and different trees, we're like, you know what, just having a sword fight with somebody, it's going to be pretty tough to make that sword fight not feel like cheap, because you do so much damage at this point that they're just going to have to be a gigantic health sponge for it to not end in 30 seconds and feel lackluster. So we're going to have to do something where we force you to use your other mechanics, and we just gave you this kinetic grappling ability where you can launch yourself around. So that's going to probably want to play a pretty major role going into this. And that was why we made things like the giant fire elemental and then the ending with Dragor. So we're like, this way you're doing something that's not just, oh, I'm this all-powerful hero. It's, no, my goal is just to survive while this is going, right? This isn't a foregone conclusion that I'm going to accomplish this. I still have to fight for every inch. And that seemed like the best way to do it.
And now, even though you have these powers, now you're still going to have to use these powers effectively in a intense situation to actually to win the fight.
That's probably my favorite fight in the game. Looking back on it, it was so much fun. And
I like it a lot too.
I know we mentioned it, but the Seraph Dragon, and I mentioned it to Anthony, but that ballista mechanic, it's so small and it's so invisible if you don't look at it, but the potential of that thing and how it was used, and you can like make little grab points for yourself and climb. Oh my god, that was so cool. Part of me wishes that could have been used a little bit more, but I understand that you guys were probably
It was honestly one of those things where we were like, this could be cool, we could do it quickly, let's add it. And then we added it, and then
found a bunch of other places to use it.
Yeah, and then we figured, like, okay, this thing's cool, we need to use it in a few other places. We could have used it in more places for sure.
Yeah.
But it didn't really, none of the other locations really like warranted it being there. Maybe towards the end in like chapter 4 it could have made more sense.
Oh sure.
A little bit. But
I think it gave the castle level a really strong identity, it being exclusive to it. The castle was one of my favorite levels, honestly.
Same.
That was same. Yeah, honestly. That was one of the things that we wanted for every level, for it to have its own like type of specific mechanic that you would use pretty much in that level. It'd be specific to a specific area in that level, and that would be, you know, you probably wouldn't use it in another level, like the bombs, for instance, in the first level.
Right.
Which later I added the ability through the code so that you could actually use them on some other things. Like I think the puzzle in the castle where you have to combine the different explosive powders to create the bomb barrel and then blow out the wall. I think the bombs actually do work there now.
Oh.
And also you could use them to mine, like if you just throw them at like ores, like ore collections of gold and iron, you could use that and it would actually blow those up. Because some people would still have them in their inventory.
I was about to
Like,
say.
you know, you might as well give them something to do with it. You know, like obviously you could use it on enemies, it'll do some damage, but any little extra bit you can do. Because that was a major factor from the beginning was we want to give people, we want to reward people who have the idea to use the mechanics creatively, right? So because one of the worst things in a game, it's not that bad in reality, but one of the most disappointing things is missed opportunities in a game where you go, oh, I wonder if I could do this, and then you try it and it doesn't work, and you go, oh, that would have been. So we wanted to make as many things work as we could, where if someone goes, oh, I wonder if I could set my arrow on fire. I wonder if I could grab my fireball I just threw out of the air with telekinesis and then control it manually. And then you do it and you go, oh, that's awesome.
Heck
like,
yeah.
I didn't know I'd be able to do that. And the fact that the game lets me is awesome.
By the end of the game, that was probably it was dramatically ineffective most of the time, but grabbing the enemy's projectiles and using kinesis to just throw them back, that was my favorite way to fight.
Yeah.
It was so satisfying. And
yeah, well,
so
we wanted to not force onto you, but the puzzle in Godly Island at the beginning of the magic path where you have to reflect one energy ball into a receiver with your shield and then put another one into a different receiver with telekinesis.
Yes.
The whole point of that puzzle was to let you know, hey, these energy balls that these rock elemental drones are shooting at you can be affected by both your shield and your kinesis so that you can maneuver them in different ways. This way, when you encounter those guys, you go, oh, I know how to handle this. And they do that, and then you kill them with their own energy ball, and you go, yeah, get bodied. Like,
that was...
I don't know. I don't know who you think you're messing with, but I run this. Like hopefully we give you that sort of mentality.
Yeah, by the end of the game, those were probably two of my favorite enemies to fight. Was the little drones and the crystal elementals.
Yeah, I like them too.
But I was gonna say what you said about encouraging the player to use the mechanics the way that they think they should be used. So I had one experience. I think I had two, but I can't recall the second one. I had one experience in the game where it was like, it was one of those experiences where you're just like, why does every game not have something like this? Because it was on Godly Island. I think it was the Magic Path, and it was towards the very end, and it was to get the Fire Scepter. Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Okay, so I saw that pillar. I was like, that I have to remember that is important, and there's a little hole in the ground. I'm not forgetting about this. And after I finished the puzzle at the very end with the purple crystals, I was like, okay, so I walked up some steps, and I know these things don't change their Y coordinate. So if I wonder, I might be doing something really dumb here. So I dragged that thing all the way over there, and I found that Fire Scepter, and I was just like, holy crap, this is a special game.
That was a hidden one.
I think that's actually the least hidden of the hidden weapons.
You think?
Because like you said, you'll see the pillar and you'll go, this is something. Right,
but it's one of those ones where it's like, I remember us having this conversation when we made it, actually. But it's one of those ones where it's like, you gotta go back. It's like, you're not like, very few people in reality, I think, would think, oh, this goes all the way back over there. Like, it's just,
But that adds to it for me. Like that.
Oh, I know.
You think you're like, oh, there's no way they would have actually done this. Like, there's no way. And then it happens, and you're just like, oh. I remember, like, I was recording the microphone in the headset, and I was like, this is a good game. And I sound like such a goblin when I say it.
That's why, like, we had that conversation, because we were like playing through like the players, like different types of players' mentalities, kind of like, maybe they'll say this in their head, or maybe they'll say that, and we did that a lot when we were making the puzzles and hiding the thing, like the bow in chapter 2 up in the tower.
You'd probably never find or found, because most
the
people
bow. Were there more special weapons hidden in the game?
Every dungeon has a weapon hidden in it.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah, see, that's what I was saying. That the scepter is probably the easiest because you have such an obvious thing
Oh
going,
my
hey, this is something I should
god!
think about. But the other ones are all either just like you have to be super thorough, like check every inch, and then you'll find
Yeah.
maybe a path leading somewhere.
I thought I
Or
was.
you have to exactly that. Well, that was we had not an argument, but a discussion about it when we first started making the game, where Mike wanted to make those things a little bit easier to find. And I was adamant. I was like, no, no shot. People don't need these weapons, right? They'll buy weapons, they'll
Right.
craft weapons. Like these are specifically to reward the people who are going to go the extra mile. And the intention is that probably less than 10% of players will get these. And that's good.
Yep.
That's what we want, right? So the ones who do get it know, oh, there's no way everybody's getting. Because that's even when you're playing a single player game. I don't know about you, but for me, there's always some level of competition
Oh
with
yeah.
with perceived performance of other people in the situation, right? Like that's a big part of the game where you go, I want to know that I'm successful because I'm doing this well, right? That's one of the most rewarding things in a game, in my opinion. So if you can prove to yourself, or if you can get in a situation where you can
Mm-hmm.
say definitively, most people would not have been able to do that either as well, or they would have never found this thing. That's going to give you that endorphin rush where you go, yeah, this was dope.
Yep.
It's all about that dopamine hit.
All about it.
I got a big one whenever I made the what's it, the vengeance sword or the vengeful sword.
Hmm.
I got a
Vengeance,
big
yep.
one when I finally was able to. I killed the last watcher and I was like, ooh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I put one of the damage enchantments on there and I was just like, well, this game is once again incredible.
Oh, the just the straight double damage
Yeah,
enchantment. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, that would see that we had that in mind. We were like, well, we're gonna give them technically they're gonna get the seventh essence from the Watcher before they go into the other world.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have that and they have this meteor shard, which again is pretty unlikely for them to miss it, especially if they've put points into like their melee damage, they're gonna tear through almost everything. Right. So
Yep.
that was part of why we're like the bosses can't just be straight sword fights because when you've
Yeah.
got vengeance and that you're gonna just cut through them. So we needed to make it where you're gonna have to rely on the other mechanics and this new mechanic primarily, so that it's something you're a little, you're starting off on the wrong foot and you have to master it as you go. Otherwise, it would just be a cakewalk because it
Yeah.
is a long game, right? So we wanted to make sure that every time you go somewhere new, and obviously throughout the course of just wherever you are, you're having new things introduced to you. You're always learning something because if you're not, then it
Yeah.
just gets boring and repetitive. And you really need to know, okay, this is something new now. I'm going to have to master a new technique, or I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with this enemy specifically. He's not quite like the other ones were, and it'll keep things fresh and exciting.
Yeah, like we've all definitely been conditioned by video games and movies and stuff like that to
Mm-hmm.
like be like, okay, once I've mastered something, like I'm the master of this, and it's like it starts to lose its interest. So we definitely tried to maintain like every chapter there was that kind of like, you're coming into a new understanding of something, so that way you always have that, how do I incorporate this into all these different things that I know now? And by the end of the game, excuse me, by the end of the game, you have so many different things that you have control over that you can, like with the telekinesis, you have the
Yeah.
three different abilities with that. You have your different fire spells and or destruction spells, like and then all these different like mechanics, like there's bombs in places, there's all this stuff that you're gonna have to like account for.
We even bring back that wall that everyone hated from before the
Yeah,
golem at one point. Just be like,
yeah,
hey, remember this? I know it sucked, but now you know what to do, right? So that'll make you
yeah.
feel good to
Yeah.
go, oh, okay, I know what to do with this.
So I guess the next one is it's a bit of a meme question, but the voice recognition. Me and Anthony talked about it. Why don't you give me the Sparks notes on how you guys came up with the voice recognition system? Because it felt like sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But whenever it does work, it really heightened my sense of place in the actual game. I was like, oh my god, I'm talking to the merchant. I'm telling Master that I'm gonna avenge him. But there were times whenever I'd have to like stand there and shout at him and reassure him that I am saying the right line.
Yeah, well, it goes off of Microsoft's speech recognition, so you could technically improve it by going through the wizard in your system, and it gives you these prompts and says like, "Oh, read out these paragraphs," and so that it gets, better attuned to your specific way of speaking, any
Oh, wow.
accents or cadences, things like that.
Yeah.
But it does a pretty good job for the most part, just out of the box.
Yeah.
But you can get it to be more responsive. And like I said, it's just a Microsoft plugin. It took not that much effort to get it working in the game. The only thing I really did to get it to be even as accurate as it is where it listens for the whole string, right? That's why all of the responses you give are about a sentence instead of just like 1 or 2 words.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it were 1 or 2 words, it's very easy for it to mess up 1 or 2 words. But if you say 9 words and it doesn't recognize 2 of them, it can still figure out, oh, this is what you were trying to say.
Okay.
Probably this thing. But that's about the extent. There's not really a deep dive into it. It's just Microsoft had a plugin. We thought that could be pretty cool. It is VR.
Yeah.
We threw it in there, and then we of course give you the ability to just press the button on the option anyway, just in case.
Yeah. Like that was the original implementation, was just pressing the
just press the button.
Yeah, just picking your response. And then I remember Anthony coming into my room one day and going, "Oh, I just found this plugin for for Unity games where you can talk to the game through your microphone and have it like trigger stuff." I was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of stuff like that, like voice attack or something like that."
Voice attack, yeah.
And then and so he was like, "I think I'm gonna add it." I was like, "All right, sounds cool." And then he added it like over the course of like a couple days.
There was like 6 hours, and I was like, "Oh, now I'll just enhance the dialogue system around it a little bit."
Yep. And it was one of those things where it's like, again, we were learning on this project. It was like that was the primary goal of the project. Like the primary goal of the project was potentially make something commercially viable, and learn how to make video games.
Yeah, pay our bills while getting an education.
And it's worked out like that so far. It's still paying our bills, gladly enough. And so it was a lot of exploration and a lot of random locations or random fields and stuff like that. Whatever really piqued our interest kind of made it into the game.
As long as it was reasonable. Like some people asked to make the voice recognition a more prominent part of the game. Like some people were like, "Oh, it'd be awesome if I could just say like fireball or destruction and have it switch over to my destruction magic instead of me having to open the wheel." And I was like, in theory, but in practice it won't work as frequently as you need it to. And if you want it to happen and you need it to happen in that moment, you're saying restoration and you desperately need to heal yourself and it doesn't recognize it, then you're just going to get frustrated when it doesn't work. And it's better to have a foolproof system where you could just go, okay, let me grab restoration. Especially, I think, although again, as a developer, not the best judge of it because I spend so many hours with the game that everything eventually becomes second nature to me. Yeah. But I think by the end of it, it gets to be second nature where you can just do a quick swipe with your hand while you're opening the spell wheel to choose the discipline you want. Like, you don't really have to think about it too much, because you only have to go in the general direction. So as long as you know how it's going to open, you can get to it pretty quickly. So typically for me, when I play, the spell wheel doesn't even fully open before I've selected the thing I want and it's closing again, and then I'm already doing the spell that I wanted.
Yeah, I completely agree 100%. There's a really good YouTuber who he was talking about, I think he was mentioning Skyward Sword. Yeah, that's right. And he said that if there was a hypothetical controller, and whenever you pressed a button and it was supposed to do an action, if it did that action 90% of the time, that would be absolutely unacceptable.
It's garbage. It's absolute garbage.
Yeah, it needs to be 100% reliable every single time you need to perform that action. And I think that that's incredibly true.
Yeah, Matt,
the instant you start fighting the controls, your enjoyment plummets tremendously.
Like, think about every time your mouse has died. Like, a click is started going out. You instantly notice something's off when you're playing something. Yeah.
Or just like lag in general. You're playing an online game and you're like, oh yeah, this is working 99% of the time. But then when you get that lag spike, you go, this is trash. This game is awful. Like
my immersion.
Yeah, I've got like 5,000 hours in Rocket League, and every time I lag, I go, this is the worst game I've ever played. I don't know why I keep playing this game.
But one more thing that I want to bring to your attention is on the voice recognition front is the bug that I ran into where it was I was heading towards the last trial on Godly Island, and it was Master Abaddon appeared and he started talking to me, and I forget why I said hello and then I said goodbye, and that caused him to break, and he started using the merchant's speech information. So he just went, "Hello, adventurer," and it really surprised me, and I busted out laughing. And I know Anthony told me why, but I guess if you want to repeat it, Anthony, I think it's a funny story.
Feature.
Yeah, we've decided that's a feature, and that all of the NPCs are a shapeshifter.
They're all the same person.
As a game developer,
yeah, that's one of those hidden story.
There are no such things as bugs.
Yeah,
only unplanned features.
Yeah, but yeah, it was pretty much just like I said, Abaddon got added pretty much right at the end. He was one of the last things. All 4 chapters, I think, had already been released at that point, and he wasn't even in yet. And it was like, okay, in these last like 2 or 3 months after the 4th chapter released, want to polish this up to be
clean,
a final like version where like if we never have to patch it again, it's good to stand on its own, right?
Right.
Like it should be ideally. Like we were in early access for 2.5 years almost, or somewhere around there. So it's like that should be enough time to get a game to a point where you can just put it and let it stand on its own.
Yeah. But for 6 months, it's never gonna finish it.
Yeah, that was another review.
Still salty.
Yeah, a little salty about it. Guy jumped into the Discord and asked when Chapter 2 was coming out, and we're like, "Oh, the first part of it should be up in about 2 weeks." I was like, "Okay, cool," and then he left the Discord instantly and left us a negative review saying the game will never come out.
Oh my god,
so that was fun. But
it was a fun interaction.
Yeah, but Abaddon was he started off basically as a replica of the merchant, and then we swapped out his materials,
right?
And
a prefab,
his character mesh, exactly, and so he still has to this day, because I don't think I'm going to go change it. He still has the greetings and salutations of the merchant. So if you do trigger him by saying that, then he'll just bust into his voice real quick, hit you with an animation, smiling, and then go back to doing his thing.
That's so crazy. Like I think I lost my mind whenever that happened, and I'm so glad that it did happen.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty funny one. Funny bugs are great. I mean, you're never going to get every bug out of a game, like it's not possible. But if you can get the ones that are still in there to be funny, then you're in pretty good shape.
That's
or
true.
To enable speedrunners.
Sure.
Yeah.
Either or.
Has anybody ever speed ran Vengeful Rites?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
We had 1 or 2 people in the Discord that were just playing through it a few times, and I think one of them said he managed to get through the entire first chapter in like an hour and 12 minutes or something like that, which is quick considering it takes most people like 3 or 4 hours. But he already knew all the puzzles and what to do and whatnot. Probably ran past a bunch of enemies.
Sure.
Straight Dark Souls did.
But I mean, that's not. You could definitely do it faster, because there is. I'm gonna let you in on a little insider secret here. There is an exploit you can do, where if you open up the Steam VR menu, in most situations, it'll allow you to walk through walls physically. Like if you have the space in your play space to actually step through a wall, then when you close the Steam VR menu, you'll be on the other side of the wall. There's a few places of importance in the game, because I knew about this for forever, but I couldn't really stop you from doing it. And where I just put giant like colliders in the places or on the other side of a wall. So I was like, no, you have to do this the right way. Like you can't go through this, door that requires 6 tile pieces to get on the other side of it. You're going to have to get these tile pieces. Can't have you skip over 2/3 of a dungeon and just do that. But,
oh my God, that's insane.
But in a lot of places you can do that.
So one that I wrote down today because I was just thinking about it, the soundtrack, how did you find the composer, and where can I listen to it? Because I looked for it on YouTube, but there's nothing as far as I could tell.
Well, there's not one single composer, and due to our general poverty and not expecting the game to be super financially performant, we had to go with a lot of the cheaper. Like I think the most I spent on music was like $25 for a pack that had like 10 10 songs that most of
Oh,
them ended up becoming like boss battle music, like specific themes for the various bosses. But then
okay.
other ones were just go on the Unity asset store, listen for hours and hours to try and find some cool music, and then cherry pick the things that sound like, yeah, that would fit. That suits the vibe of the game, you know.
Ah, okay. Well, that's totally fair. I mean, like you said, it was your first game, and you used it as a learning experience above all else.
Yeah. And it
So
worked. We know how to make games now. I feel
that's
pretty
true.
good about it.
Um, do you guys ever see yourself returning to anything like Vengeful Rites in the future? Like maybe not a direct sequel, but something the scale and the scope of Vengeful Rites.
Yeah,
Probably. Yeah.
eventually. Eventually. I think right now we're more in the because we're still well, here's the thing about game development. You've never mastered it, right?
Sure.
Like
Oh yeah.
you can know so much about it, but every day there's something new coming out that it's not possible to be on the cutting edge at every moment. And it's one of those things where there's so much to it. There's so much involved with every aspect of it, optimization, how to make the art, how to make it correctly, how to code correctly, how to do things as performantly as possible, that you're just always learning new things. So we're focused a lot now on trying to expand our repertoire. And the fastest way to do that, or maybe the best way to do it, is to just do a bunch of different smaller projects that focus on these different things that you need to brush up on, right? So like my new game, Bocce Time, is a multiplayer game. Never made one of those before. And,
Mhm.
the lighting and stuff in it is vastly superior to something like Vengeful Rites was. Because I was like, I need to learn multiplayer, and I definitely need to learn how to make these things look better. So that was the goal on that. And it seemed like sort of similar to how I was describing Inescapable earlier, where it's like, oh, this is a relatively simple game to use these things. Like
Right.
Inescapable was relatively simple in general, and also for VR. Oh, I just need to be able to pick up items, move them around, interact, and walk around. That's like the bulk of it. And Bocce is like, oh, I just need to be able to move between players in a turn-based thing, right? So lag's like not even really a factor,
Yeah.
and it'll get my feet wet with multiplayer. So we're sort of focused on that. But I would like to go back and do something on that scale again, but probably not for at least a few years. I'm really liking the short development time of smaller projects compared to nearly 4 years it took us to make Vengeful Rites, which, like I said, we
Right.
could probably do now in like two and a half. But that's still a long time. And if you don't know, which you never do, especially with VR, how the game's going to perform, that's a hell of a commitment to
Mm-hmm.
make and go, well, let's work on it for 2 years, and then, oh, it just flopped. Well, I guess I have to go get like a normal job now because that didn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. Honestly, I don't.
I would
I,
hate to get a normal job again. Game dev is awesome. I
you
love
get to
game dev
sleep
so much.
all day.
Oh my God. And I always want to work. I don't even need to take days off. It's like I just enjoy doing it.
Oh man, I always tell myself one day this YouTube thing will take off and I'll be able to do it.
I really think it will. Like I said, you've got a huge backlog of videos too, which is one of the most important factors.
Right. Oh, I,
Like
I looked up Wiz. What was his name?
Wicked Wiz.
Yes, I watched a couple of his videos. They're fantastic.
Yeah, and he just exploded. He had like I think he had like 10,000 subscribers, which is not a small amount anyway, but he had that like a month ago,
Mm-hmm.
and then within a month he's over 100,000. He's like, I just made my 100K celebration video, and I had no plans whatsoever because I thought this was like 2 years out,
Oh, that's
and
so cool.
it snuck up on me after like 3 weeks.
You love to
So
see
it
it.
happens. That stuff happens
It's
pretty
true.
regularly even. It's like as long as you keep plugging away and you're making good content, like eventually there's a tipping point and it just starts to snowball.
Oh, sure. Are there any games that you guys are playing right now that you feel like, oh, we could make something like this, like, but really cool in VR? Like, I know one of my biggest game, if I ever decide to go back and dive into Unity again, I want to make something inspired by Sekiro. Sekiro is one of my favorite games,
That
but
was amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's like what we were talking about earlier. You feel like you're on that next level, and it's a competitive single player game. Like
Hmm.
I feel like I can take down the Guardian Ape faster than somebody else, and that's what makes it so much fun for me. I
Yeah,
beat it
some
for
of
like
the
no, go for it, go for it.
I would say some of the most fun I had with it, or some of the most satisfying parts of it, is I was playing through it with a bunch of my friends, like all at the same time. We're all going through and like, sharing like, oh, I just beat this thing, or oh, how did you deal with this thing, or whatever. And just competing with each other, like, oh, how many attempts did it take you to kill it? 6? Oh, well, I wouldn't tell people about that, because I only did it took me only 2, like that kind of thing. You just start messing with them. Like one of my buddies, the first guardian ape, it took him like 30 tries. He couldn't handle it, and I was like, that's because
Yep.
you're basically a Dark Souls virgin, and you're going too deep into it with the Sekiro mindset. And if you know Dark Souls, run in circles around this dude, and then strike him as soon as he leaves himself open, and you'll get him fine. And
Yep.
just one shot at him. But I gave him a lot of grief for that, and then we've all given each other plenty of grief for taking extra turns. We're like keeping count. We're like, oh, this is your 30th attempt. Well, I'm just saying I got him on 29, so it's pretty embarrassing.
I did that with my friends. Whenever it first came out, I was the only one in my friend group to beat it within like the first week or so of it coming out, and they all got stuck like either on Owl or they got stuck on Genichiro or something like that. And I was just like,
two big ones.
That's funny. I'm already done with it. Going back through for the purification ending. Sorry.
Oh, you struggled with that? Really? Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess, are there any games like that you guys are just, you feel like, oh, that mechanic is so cool, like we could do something with that?
There's a few for me anyway. I don't think Mike is too, like, he's not as passionate about VR.
No.
So moving stuff into the VR realm, that's something I'm more into. And there's a couple of games I would like to do. One, the original Demon Souls. Something like that, where you have the archstones that you go through and it brings you to different worlds. I have this idea of making something like that with sort of Vengeful Rites combat, but then when you go through those archstones, it's all procedurally generated and it's primarily focused on like crafting. You'd go in and gather the various like moonstone and the different like titanite shards effectively to come back and craft your elemental weapons that would help you then destroy the other archstone that's got like the counter element to it, right? Like you go through a fire one and then go into a frost one, and you come in with your fire stuff you crafted from the other one to have a big advantage, that kind of thing. And also there was a game called Guns of Icarus that you probably never heard of.
I have.
Great. And it was awesome. And
that would be so cool.
Really cool in VR, because if there's a game in VR currently called Iron Wolf, which is a submarine game that you play co-op with your buddies, and it's super fun. And they were going to add PvP to it, but unfortunately that was also made by 2 people. One of the developers died. So the other one was like, you know what? The game is basically finished as it is, and I'm not emotionally ready to go in and start trying to basically erase all of my partner's previous code and do it differently to enable the PvP. So that's getting scrapped. That's not, which is understandable.
Yeah, that stuff
breaks my heart. But I would love to basically, absolutely. But I would love to basically recreate something like Guns of Icarus in VR with similar mechanics to what Iron Wolf has, and go, oh, you're up in sky ships shooting each other out of the sky by physically manning turrets and physically repairing your hulls and balloons and stuff as they get damaged, and piloting a ship in the sky. That seems like that would be just an awesome for VR.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah. There was a couple of ideas that we had for different games for VR that maybe one day we'll go back to. Bocce Time was not one of them. And I've been working on it.
I was just playing a ton of Walkabout, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is just such a good way to use VR.
And then a whole theft thing. Like he was like, man, that PS VR or PS Move game back in the day with Bocce, with Sports Champions with Bocce or whatever was dope. I'm just gonna make that one Bocce game.
Is that how Bocce Ball came to be? You just saw that and you're like, huh, we could do that. I was like,
Walkabout plus Sports Champions equals profit.
Basically, yeah.
Hopefully, that's the idea. Bocce Time coming out June 17th. Pre-order now.
Wishlist now.
Wishlist now. Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, it's hopefully one day. Some of the other ideas that we came up with will see the light of day. There were some cool ones.
There's no shortage of ideas. It's pretty easy to come up with ideas. It's just hard to actually execute them. Right, it takes a lot of time, especially in VR.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, it's easier now.
It's like I've been looking for things to play with friends that have VR, but you have things like Pavlov and you have other things, but nothing. There's no good like co-op adventure games for VR now. And
Not really. Although Skyrim is getting
was there a multiplayer
apparently a
mod?
pretty good multiplayer mod. I saw like a trailer for it where it has like there was like 30 people on screen running around. So I don't know
Wow.
what the cap is. Maybe they were just stress testing it, but it seemed to be doing a pretty good job. And Skyrim obviously is basically infinite content. So if you can get
Yeah.
a good multiplayer mod for that and all the other cool VR mods, you could have a pretty epic experience.
I can only hope that Bone Lab, the modding scene for Bone Lab, goes nuts whenever it comes out.
Yeah. There is Carnage Chronicles. I don't know if you played that. I'm not a huge fan of it. Like there's a few co-op dungeon games, right? There's VR Dungeon Night, which is like a procedural one, but I think it's been in development hiatus for like a year and a half at this point.
There is
And then
one.
there's Carnage Chronicles, which is I think up to 4-player co-op dungeon crawler. It's not dissimilar to Vengeful Rites. It's a very pretty game. It
Okay.
definitely looks better than Vengeful Rites, but mechanically I don't like it as much, but obviously I'm pretty biased. But
There,
but it's a pretty cool one. It's like 10 hours long too, so it's got a pretty lengthy campaign to it, especially for a VR game.
okay. There's one I have in my wish list called Legendary Tales,
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
but it's one of the like it looks like it would be fun, but it also I think it's only procedurally generated dungeons, and I feel like that'd get kind of boring after a while.
Yeah, you need a lot of variety in
Yeah.
your modular set pieces and things for it to not just feel hyper repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's easier than you think. I think, though, in reality, like
I've never played a procedural game that didn't feel repetitive, so I
I
don't think
haven't
it's that
I
easy.
haven't played many procedural games, and I've played a decent amount. Like Minecraft doesn't feel very repetitive, like
False.
in their little dungeons and stuff like that. It's like a good, it's this. It feels like it's a dungeon, like it's a mine shaft or whatever,
Sure,
right?
sure.
But it's always slightly different. Like, and then it's just about uh
You're talking about with mods or without mods?
without mods, just basic Minecraft. They've come a long way, yeah, all right.
Yeah, well, it's also been out for like what 12 years, something like that. So,
Yeah, I know.
so it doesn't mean that it's easy. Like, oh, this game that's had a 12-year head start on it, or been in development for 15 years, active development. They
there's
got it done. So,
there's plugins now.
yeah.
People
Yeah.
have taken their research and given it
No,
to
but
the masses.
yeah, but there are a few. I just think none of them really grab me. That Legendary Tales does seem like maybe the most promising one for a
Sure.
co-op experience aside from Skyrim. But I don't know the little bit I've seen of it I haven't played it myself, but the combat seems not like super waggly, but where everything's just a crazy like health sponge. I'm not a big fan of
Yeah.
physics combat in most games unless it's done exceptionally well. Like more often than not, it feels like you're just banging on something with a pool noodle.
Yeah,
Like Blade and Sorcery feels good.
I
But
think that the only one that has really done it exceptional is Boneworks for me. But
yeah.
that was my first VR game, so like I'm a little biased.
Yeah, sure.
Now I'm super. This is totally off topic, but I'm so curious. You two are brothers, right?
Twin brothers.
Twins.
That's insane. So like, I have two siblings. I have an older brother and a younger sister. I'm the middle child, and we're a super tight knit family. Like, how did you two get into development together? If you don't mind talking about it, of course. And also, how old are you two, if you don't mind?
34.
Just
Okay.
turned 34.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah.
2 weeks.
Happy birthday! Wait, a few weeks. When was your birthday?
May 12th.
May 16th.
Oh my god.
Oh my
Oh
god!
my
Anyone-
god!
Anyone listening,
Jeez.
a cool
Oh
birthday present would be
God.
to Wishlist Bocce Time on Steam.
I already did. That was your present. Happy birthday.
June 17th.
I did it today,
Right.
actually.
I got it right?
June
That's the thing.
17th. June
That's
17th.
it.
Yeah, I think that was right. But anyway, like
I don't know, not my
development.
game.
Development. How did you? I guess you guys just since you're twins,
Well, we didn't get into it at the same time. All that.
I started
Oh.
way before him, actually.
Yeah.
that is
for
not what I would have
actual
guessed.
development. No. Well, I've always been really drawn to creative hobbies. So like I've been doing like things like animation and writing and playing the drums, stuff like that, and graphic design for a really long time, right? For like over 20 years.
Wow.
But I didn't get into the coding aspect of it. I used to do web design, so that's somewhat similar, but not really. Like code and HTML are not in any way similar, or CSS. Like PHP is kind of getting into it, but it's still pretty basic compared to something like C++ or C Sharp.
Right.
But I was sort of amassing hobbyist level skills in various creative fields, with sort of the end goal being at some point I'll probably combine all these together and start working on some games. But Mike was actually working on games before me. Maybe not making them, but I'll let him explain his back.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep it down, all right? Uh, but
It's enough. So he was working with
so, so like I started my first like foray into game development stuff was I became a game master for this game. It's an obscure sandbox MMO called Mortal Online.
Okay.
And I worked for them as a game master for a little while, helped them as a tester, and then learned a lot of things from them. And then after that, one of their team members, myself, and another person that I met from Mortal, we all started working. There's actually a funny story. It's like me and my friend Motown. I met Motown playing Mortal, helping out new players learn how to play Mortal. Then 2 years later or something like that, I'm playing a Arma Life server, uh, and I hear this kid's voice, and I'm like, "Is that Motown's voice?" And I run over to him, I'm like, "Is your name Motown?" He's like, "Yeah." And like, and we
No
start
way.
talking. Yeah, it was super crazy, and it's like right at that same time, another person who I had met in Mortal, and uh, I wanted to make a life server because I was like, we could totally design a life server. Like my friends and I, we have like a group of people that we just design.
If
We
you're
just
not
talk about
familiar, a life server is kind of like GTA Online, but
right. It's like
for
GTA
Oh,
Arma.
RP.
cool.
Like, have you
Yeah.
ever seen No Pixel?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay. Well, if you've ever seen No Pixel, it's some great content. You should check it out. But it's basically like it's like a mini MMO in Grand Theft Auto,
Kind of
where
like
there's like
Second Life, but not trash.
yeah, like there's like bank robberies, or you could get like a job at like a burger place, or it's crazy. Um, and so like Motown and I met on this server that I was playing on uh, for a life server, and like another friend Paratus that I met, who was working for Mortal, uh, was like a coder. So I was like, I basically built a team with Motown, Paratus, another friend of mine, Scalcon, and then we all went in together. I paid for the server and stuff, and we all went in together on the life server. Motown knew the owner of the server that we met back on, and he got us like the base code for
Oh, cool.
for their life server, so we were able to like have like a springboard to shoot off of. And then our server quickly became one of like the most popular servers because we added like housing. As like one of the lead designers, I made it very clear that like we wanted to try to get away from these stupid rules that these servers enforced. We wanted to make it more like a real MMO where the game enforces the rules, um, instead of like admins running around being, "Oh, you can't do that," which was like most of these other servers. So then we did that. It became really successful. We decided to make a Kickstarter. We tried to make an actual game. The Kickstarter
Wow.
was successful. We made the money that we needed to make. But then a little bit of internal drama happened, and I left the project because I didn't feel comfortable working on it anymore. And then that's when I started learning like 3D modeling and stuff like that. And then once I kind of like took a little bit of a break for a couple of years, learned 3D modeling here and there in my free time. And then a couple of years later, Anthony was like, "Hey," like
Yeah, he
him and
was trying to get me involved for a while, going, "Hey, we should make games. We should make games together. That would be cool." And
yeah,
I was like, maybe. maybe at some point, sure. And then
Maybe.
eventually I was like, yeah, you know what? Let's just like we were bored. We were working together at the same place, and we had been
It
there
wasn't
for a
even
few
me
years.
actually. It was you and Shad. You and
Like
Shad
you were
started doing
involved initially, but I think
kinda. Yeah.
you got there a little after us, like that night, and we were like, hey, we decided we're just gonna download Unity and see about making some game. We had a lot of free time at the job we were working at the
Great job.
time. Thank you. Yeah, it was a good job, and
Yeah, no, the job we had. Yeah, no, not you.
yeah, no, I
But
crushed it. But but we had
Such
like
brothers.
we had 4 or 5 days off every week, and it was like if we're
Holy
not
crap.
using that time to like go ham and try to improve
Yeah.
ourselves, right? Like we have so much time to learn and educate ourselves so that we're not doing, because it was a good job, but it was a job. It wasn't a career. So
Yep.
it's like this is not something we're gonna make our lives out of. We want something that we're gonna want to be passionate about, and now's the best time. We're making pretty good money and we have a lot of free time, so let's dive into something that we do want to make a career out of. And we've been, lifelong gamers and homebodies like our entire lives. So it seems like the obvious thing. And like I said, I had been um, working in creative pursuits and focusing on things like graphic design and writing and animation and stuff like that for a long time. So it
Heck
just
yeah.
seemed like if I could learn to code, which was going to be the biggest barrier, then there's really nothing else. Like I already have a good enough base skill set, enough like experience with these various tools that I should be able to combine them and make something. And then coding turns out is my favorite part of it. Like coding is awesome.
Oh my god,
But
really?
yeah, I'm glad I went into it. But
Whew.
yeah, game development in general is amazing. There's no part of it I don't like. Like even fixing bugs, which is why I say like I don't even really take days off. I force myself to occasionally. Like I'll finish something in a game. I'll be like, okay, I want to get this system set up and make sure it's functional and working correctly and releasable. And then once it is, I go, all right, I should probably just take a day and chill, play some games, and catch up on shows or whatever, hang out with friends, because
Yeah.
otherwise I would just keep working, which I'm totally fine with. Because like sometimes I'll sit down and go, I should probably stop, and I go, yeah, but what would I rather be doing? And the answer is almost always nothing. I'd rather be doing this anyway, so keep going.
Yep.
But it's
I
just
feel
it's
you.
such a great because I'm sure it's you have a similar thing with making your videos because it's like
Yep.
you'll come up with potentially writing a script and then you'll fine tune that and you'll tweak it. You go, oh, let me cut the fat here. This will be better like this. I can present this better this way. And then also I want to edit it this way. This kind of music would be good here. And you just have such control and it's such a like representation of yourself at the end of it.
It's
And
the
then
best part.
not only that, yeah, it's great, but it's also all those other things that I did, like I said, like graphic design and animation, writing, web design, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Those scratched like parts of the itch of like, oh, I want to create something cool, right? And then some of them, like animation, takes forever. It's such a long
Yep.
process. It's rewarding, but it takes so long to. You'll work on something for hours and hours, and like, oh, I
it's
got
so
that second
rewarding
and a
though.
half.
Yep.
Well,
I
I'm
get it. I
saying for
get
like
it.
2D animation, like I was
Yeah,
doing back in the day, it's a lot faster with 3D animation.
it
Oh
really
yeah.
is.
But 2D animations, like, oh, I just worked for 8 hours. That second and a half looks lit.
Yep.
Like that looks great.
Yep.
And it's like game development. One, the animation you're doing 3D animation, so it's just tremendously faster to begin with, and you could potentially use mocap, so that just like
Yeah.
ups your quality immediately. But then also with things like writing code, you can prototype something in like minutes, depending on what it is. It can be maybe a few hours for like a relatively advanced thing, and then most of the time comes to just eliminating unwanted behavior, right? Like you can make something do what you want it to do very quickly, and then you spend a lot of time making sure it doesn't do what you don't want it to do and eliminating bugs. But you just get this perfect rhythm with game development where it's like I can knock something out quick and then I get that quick satisfaction of, oh, I created this thing and it's fun. And especially if it's a mechanic or something, I could go in and test it, or if it's this effect, this visual effect, or this UI or whatever it might be. But then you also have the long drawn out continual reward of this game is getting better and better the more I work on it, and then eventually gets released and hopefully people really like it. And then you get that, and it's just there's no end to like the joy that it brings. You're always interested in what you're doing. You're always getting some sort of dopamine hit from it. It's incredible. Like I wish everybody could do it.
Words to live by, honestly.
You know,
All right. Well, I mean, if I've burnt myself out of questions. If you guys have anything else you want to say before we cut it off, now would be the time.
I mean, I don't know if I've mentioned this Bocce Time, June 17th,
Heck
but
yeah.
that's
I was actually gonna ask if you guys are busy after this, if you would want to show me around, maybe. But of course, you don't have to.
I could jump into some Bocce Time. I'm always down for some Bocce.
I could test that new feature I had him add.
Okay, I would love that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just switched the I don't know what controllers you're playing with, but the index controllers apparently are super hit or miss depending on the person using them
Oh.
with the reliability of the grip button.
Nope, I got a
So-
Vive.
Sure, that's my daily driver too.
Yeah.
But I still use the index controls because I do like them better. And it's weird because for me, the grip button has always worked perfectly. But then for
Yeah.
some people, they go, this just doesn't work. Like I was watching a different YouTuber play. They're doing a playthrough of Vengeful Rites right now. And they were saying how they were struggling specifically with that golem boss because they were having a hard time getting the kinetic thrust to register. And they were
Huh.
like, it's because of the Vive ones. They're like, I don't think it's the game. It's the Vive ones are just, or not the Vive ones, I'm sorry, the index controllers.
Right.
They're not registering my inputs correctly with this. And then with
Huh.
Bocce Time, I really found that that's a pretty common thing because a lot of people, I had it set where you would throw the ball by gripping the controller and opening your hand. And a lot of people were just, they couldn't, either wouldn't release or was releasing early or they couldn't get it to register at all. So I was like, all right, I'm just adding an option. You can swap it to the trigger. And in fact, now on the index controllers, I have it default to the trigger and you could switch it to the grip.
Oh, that's
But,
awesome.
It's just one of those things. It's one of those things that's specific to VR development. You just have
Mhm.
to deal with so many different headsets and controllers. And,
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is why the Quest is nice, actually, because it's just a unified platform. You know, everyone on the Quest is
Yeah.
going to have the same experience, actually.
Actually, I convinced my cousin after years of showing him Half-Life Alyx and Boneworks and Beat Saber and all this other stuff and Pavlov. I was finally like, you need to get VR so you can play with me. And he was finally like, okay. So he went and he got a Quest 2, and he's been
Yeah,
having
now that the Quest 2 is so
he's been-
accessible.
having a blast and a half with Resident Evil 4 VR, and I'm jealous because I can't play it.
Yeah, I've been meaning to pick that one up. I actually haven't bought any games on the Quest yet. I bought this whole Bocce Time thing was just like a whirlwind of like, yeah, I'm gonna make that, and then I did. And it's only been like 4 months that I've been working on it.
Jeez.
So I bought the Quest like a few weeks or maybe a month into it, and I've exclusively used it for development purposes at this point. But there's a few games out there that I definitely want to pick up. That's one of them.
Well, all right. Well, I guess we can stop this little interview, and then I guess we can go play some Bocce Time.
Show.
All right. Michael, Anthony, this has been a blast and a half, and I think I've made 2 very nice friends out of this. And
Absolutely.
I'm super glad I creepered on you and found your LinkedIn.
Yeah, don't say it like that, but yeah.
That's the internet now. That's how the world
Yeah,
is.
that's where we're at.
That's how friends are made now.
But it brings
in
people
this new-
together.
It
Yeah.
brings people together.
It's you know what? Because the real lesson was the friendships we made along the way.
That's right. That's right. All right.
That was the real adventure.
Mhm.